are going to inspire and wow you with 4 incredible panelists who have amazing stories about how you can change the game as a company. So again, as Morley said, my name is Chad Bolick. I am a senior philanthropic advisor at Morgan Stanley. I work with our clients, individuals, companies, foundations, nonprofits on all aspects of their philanthropy. And I started my professional career in the world of corporate social responsibility, working in a developing country in Asia, where I spent a lot of time fielding questions from corporate executives who are arriving in a country in the throes of development and setting up factories amid abject poverty, who had very personal questions about philanthropy and also very business-oriented questions about what their companies should be doing to give back. So I start with that. Secondly, I'm really, really excited about this group because changing the game as a company, corporate social responsibility, has come a really long way. We've come a long way from the era of Nike in the mid-1990s with sweatshops, with public relations responses to those issues, moving into nice but not essential philanthropy, to much more strategic models around corporate social responsibility, even the advent of shared value, this notion of the intersection, the nexus of social impact and business ROI. So with that, we're going to move into some introductions here about folks who have very interesting multifaceted perspectives on how you can change the game as a company, as an organization. So first, to my right, Amy Lesnick. Amy is the chief executive of Pledge 1%. Pledge 1% is an incredible model that we'll hear more about, but Amy was just, and Pledge 1% was 2017 Most Innovative Nonprofit nomination by Fast Company magazine, as well as one of the top 50 most innovative companies in the world. So we have some Pledge 1% fans in the room, Amy. And interesting, before taking the reins at Pledge 1%, Amy headed up worldwide growth for cause-related campaigns at Indiegogo and was also the CEO of a very prominent Bay Area organization, Full Circle Fund, for over 7 years. We also have from Los Angeles, Sunil Gaderia. Sunil is the SVP of strategy at Age of Learning, abcmouse.com. Age of Learning is an education software startup with 600 employees whose primary product, ABC Mouse, is the #1 supplemental digital education product in the country. So I think if we have parents in the room, you probably heard of ABC Mouse. And prior to joining Age of Learning, Sunil spent 11 years at the Walt Disney Company, most recently as GM Mobile and VP Digital Distribution. We also have, hailing from the nation's capital, I'm sure you appreciated the opportunity to get out of DC right now. We have Daryn Dodson. He's the managing director of Illumin Capital. So Illumin Capital is an impact private equity firm that provides a pathway for investors, foundations, and also family offices to invest in the world's top impact funds. So Illumin Capital's unique approach brings together pioneering research partnerships with Stanford, with experiential opportunities for investors to engage with the innovations their portfolio supports and the innovators. Also, Daryn is the former director of University and Corporate Partnerships for the Idea Village, and he also sits on the board of Ben & Jerry's, the Heifer Foundation, and Impact Hub in DC. And last but not least, we have Sukhinder Singh Cassidy. Sukhinder is the CEO and founder of theBoardlist and also Joyus. She's a leading consumer internet and media executive with over 18 years of leadership experience at global and early stage companies, including Google, Amazon, Yodlee, Polyvore, Joyus, and News Corp. And prior to Joyus, Sukhinder served as the CEO of Polyvore, and she also was instrumental in building Google's businesses in both the Asia Pacific region and Latin America. She also, last year, was named by Business Insider as one of the most creative people in business. This was also an accolade from Fast Company as well, and not so long ago, a woman to watch by Forbes magazine. So Sukhinder, thank you to all of our panelists for spending a Saturday with us. Much appreciated. So without further ado, we're going to get into the panel. Amy, I'm going to start with you. Pledge 1% has a phenomenal model. It's an organization that is vitally important to startups and to the world. In fact, you were just named one of the 50 most innovative companies in Fast Company. And Pledge 1%, for those of you who don't know, was inspired by Mark Benioff's 1-1-1 model and is now truly a global movement. So tell us a little bit more about Pledge 1% and how you are working to change the status quo among companies.
Sure, thank you, Chad. And I just wanted to thank you, Chad and Anu, for setting up this panel and for having us here. This is my first TiEcon, and I'm super excited to be here. So Pledge 1% is really a global movement to create a new normal where giving back is integrated into the culture and values of companies of all sizes and stages, preferably as early as possible. So I think movements are typically about fighting against a status quo. So what's the status quo we're fighting against? The status quo we're fighting against is that right now, most founders and most companies feel like they need to wait until they're much bigger and much more established before they even think about giving back. And then it's sort of like CSR on the side. And we want to change that. If we're successful, Pledge 1% might not even need to exist in 20 years. It will just be the way things are. It will be as common as setting aside equity for future employees. It's going to be just like what people do. And there's so much potential here. I mean, if you think of today's unicorns alone, if they had given 1%, that would be about $5 or $6 billion of new philanthropy. And the money is really just a small part of it. The real magic comes when you combine the money with the talent and the technology and the creative ideas, and then the impossible can really happen. So just to kind of describe a little bit about our history and our evolution, Pledge 1% is actually pretty much a startup ourselves. We were started a little over 2 years ago. Our first year was about a proof of concept. We had about 500 pledges. Last year we grew 150%, and then actually in the last few months we've grown another 600 pledges. So we're really starting to kind of build momentum. At this point we have 1,900 companies in 50 countries that have joined the movement, including amazing companies like Salesforce and Atlassian and Box and DocuSign, Okta, Nutanix, Techstars. So it's a really nice kind of mix, as well as many, many really early stage companies that are just kind of getting off the ground. Our history, I think that Chad mentioned that we were inspired by Mark Benioff and his 1-1-1 model. So for those of you who aren't familiar, when Mark started Salesforce, he thought about what kind of company did he want to build? I mean, yes, successful, yes, innovative, but he really wanted to build a company where his business could be a force for good and where he could attract the kind of talent that actually really cared about that and wanted to be part of that kind of force. So on day one, Mark set aside 1% of equity when equity wasn't really worth anything. He set aside his intent to pledge 1% of product. They didn't even have a product yet, but he pledged 1% of product. And then he set aside 1% of time. Well, they didn't even have employees yet to volunteer time, but he again set that as his intent. And that's how the 1-1-1 model was formed. And he recognized that this would be an important force to kind of attract and retain that kind of talent that he wanted. And similarly, when Scott Bakar, another one of our founders from Atlassian, started Atlassian, he infused these values into Atlassian and also added 1% of profit. So early on, that's part of their DNA, that's part of who they were. And just as an example, so Atlassian launched a program, I think we're all familiar with freemium models, but they did an interesting twist on it early on, where for their starter licenses, instead of them being free, it was $10 for 10 licenses. And then those $10 went to Room to Read, and specifically helping young girls in Cambodia learn basic literacy skills that will transform their lives. And within, instantly, they raised like millions of dollars. And they brought themselves much closer to their partners and their customers because they were able to do this together and really create this sense of loyalty and accomplishment together. So that's an example of getting it early on. That was a really interesting twist on just a very basic model that wouldn't have happened if they were kind of thinking about it later. So I think in many ways, both Scott and Mark and our founders would say this is not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And so about 2.5 years ago, Scott and Atlassian and Mark and Suzanne DeBianca, the Chief Philanthropy Officer of Salesforce, got together with Ryan Martins from Rally, the Entrepreneurs Foundation of Colorado, along with their board members like Brad Feld from Techstars and Ron Conway here. And they formed this movement called Pledge 1%, which is really a framework for companies to pledge 1% of product, time, profit, and or equity. Our companies can do all of those. They can do one of those. Some of our companies do much more than 1%. The Boundary Group has actually pledged 15% of their carry. We have social enterprises that are, giving 80%, and kind of reinvesting it back. And then we have many companies that are doing less because they're at the beginning of their journey and they're, like Mark, setting their intent for the future. And what this looks like will really evolve over time. An organization that's just a startup and an accelerator that's like 5 people, their pledge of time may look like a done-in-a-day afternoon activity that, also ties as a team building while they eat their ramen noodles. But, as a mid-sized company, that time pledge might be some really excellent pro bono service that ties to kind of an in-kind product donation and helps to kind of actually build capacity within organizations that are doing, important impact work. And then all the way to a Salesforce who just celebrated their 2 millionth volunteer hour. So I think that there's a lot of different things, and I like to say it's almost like yoga, like, wherever you are is fine for where you are right now, but look around the room and kind of, aspire to do something more. And Pledge 1% is really here to make it easy, and also to support you through resources, through connecting you to a network, an amazing network of like-minded leaders from all around the world. We also provide lots of visibility for our members. We love to tell the stories of our members and how they're doing incredible work in the world. And there's also lots of perks. And also just to reinforce, because I don't think I mentioned this earlier, Pledge 1% members can give to any cause they care about. We're not here at all to tell people what they should care about. The money doesn't need to come through us, although we're here to support with our philanthropic partners if you need help with your equity or you need structures. We're just about empowering and sharing best practices and really collectively forming this community. So I think one other thing I wanted to mention is that we have an ethos here at Pledge 1% called Pledge It Forward. So the idea is don't just take the pledge. Take the pledge, but don't just take the pledge. We really want to encourage all of our members to really be part of this movement and to look around them into their whole ecosystem of partners and customers and suppliers and whatnot, and think about what they can do to invite, encourage, and empower those in their ecosystem to also take the pledge and reinforce this notion that no one is too small or too early to think about giving back, to think about integrating this intent into their DNA. And our members have done this in a variety of different ways. One of our members, Tech.co, who does this huge startup night at South by Southwest, just integrated it actually into their event registration. We've had folks that do accelerator applications or pitch nights integrated actually into their application. Salesforce just integrated it, they announced Tuesday this week, into their new partner model. So they're encouraging their partners to also give back to whatever causes they're passionate about. And if they do, there's extra incentives by the way of benefits. Their partner score is actually partially based on this. And at Atlassian, they just did their European summit. It was thrilling to see almost half the expo room was covered with their partners who had badges and were sharing their stories kind of on the conference app and getting extra swag for kind of telling what they're doing. So there's lots of ways to pledge it forward, and I would just say that whether you're doing this already, if you are, then stand up, take the pledge, let it be known, and help to really build the movement. And if you're not doing it yet, I would encourage you to join us. We'll have more opportunities to talk about that later. It's super simple. The pledge itself takes like less than 1 minute, and just begin your journey. And we're just here to support you along the way.
Thank you so much, Amy. So just to close the loop on that, it's so easy to join the pledge. P1. P1.world, right?
Okay, so
let's go through it.
So
what do we want people to do?
Okay, so it's P1, so just the letter P and the number 1, so just 2 digits, P1.today. That's the simple shortcut that will take you straight to the pledge form. You can do it on your phone if you want to.
P1.today.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
No TP or toilet paper in there. It's just all about P1, pledge 1 today. There we go.
All right. So thanks again. Amazing movement. Really love Pledge 1%, and this it's not just about changing the game as a company, it's really about influencing individuals as well. So moving along to Sunil at the end of the table, Sunil from Age of Learning. The EdTech space really is white hot, and Age of Learning, ABC Mouse, has quickly grown. You guys recently raised $150 million at a $1 billion valuation. From conversations with Sunil and others, I'm really impressed by the efforts that they're leading through ABC Mouse software to make this software available in public libraries across the country. In fact, Age of Learning software is currently available in 80% of libraries in the state of California, public libraries, and 40% of public libraries nationally. So there's really, really incredible penetration. So can you talk a little bit, Sunil, about how learning outcomes for kids are embedded in the business model, and about the financial sustainability of Age of Learning and what this means for better educational outcomes for kids across America?
Sure. I think you put it really well, Chad, when you talked about shared value and creating the nexus of ROI and creating social impact. And the social impact we focus on is creating learning outcomes. And so as entrepreneurs, you start with what's the problem set. And the problem set is we are not we're under-delivering for a lot of our kids in terms of education. Let me give you a stat on, it's a really depressing stat actually. The National Assessment Educational Progress, there's a National Assessment for Educational Progress, which is given to fourth graders. 60% of our fourth graders are not proficient in in literacy and in math. You know, that means is 2.5 million out of the 4 million 9-year-olds in this country do not have the foundational skills in math and reading they need for academic success. It's really terrible. And you know, as a corporation or as a company, how do we solve for that? So we first, you know, what we knew how to do is create product that is very engaging for kids. But engagement's not enough. We have to deliver learning outcomes. So we focused pretty early on ensuring that our product actually did deliver learning outcomes. We've done 14 efficacy studies with over 10,000 children that shows that ABC Mouse delivers, we have empirical evidence that the product delivers significant improvements in both math and literacy skills for children. So in addition to doing that because it creates a social impact, that also is a competitive advantage for our business. Our product works. We have research that shows our product works. So in terms of our business model, our primary business model is we sell our product to parents. We make it accessible at $7.95 a month so that a lot of parents can have it. And through that, we've been able to scale our business and create profits. And those profits are then used in 2 different ways, or many different ways, but primarily it's to invest in better product for the future that deliver even more learning outcomes. And one of the initiatives I'm responsible for is personalized learning, which is, we really feel, going to be even more transformative than what we've done up to now. And then secondly, also be able to offer our product to children from families who otherwise, or for different circumstances, may not be able to afford our product. So we started this initiative with schools. So we realized that a lot of teachers are spending their own money to bring products to their children. I mean, everything from paper to pencils for basic needs. And we're like, we don't want them to have to spend money for our product. So we started in 2012 offering our product free to teachers in classrooms, and currently there's over 65,000 teachers using it free in their classrooms in the US. We also realized that libraries as a community are really important to our community, especially for lower income families. Not only are they looking at it as a source of education through books, but even more so recently is as a place to get internet access for both the parents and their family, for their children. So in 2014, we launched a initiative to provide ABC Mouse free to libraries. We are in as Chad said, we're in 6,500 libraries now, of the 16,000 libraries in the country. Last year, which is only our second year of full operation, we had 1 million sessions on ABC Mouse through these libraries. And what we found is that libraries were coming back to us and asking, hey, we'd love to be able to offer our patrons the opportunity to check out ABC Mouse and take it home with them. As we thought about this internally, libraries have limited resources as well in terms of how much funding they get from their communities. We thought it was a really good opportunity to partner with other like-minded individuals and companies and philanthropies and foundations to look at how to provide ABC Mouse to parents at home as well. So we launched this Bring Learning Home initiative with the purpose there is to work with, sponsor ABC Mouse accounts for parents at home through the libraries. Just recently, we announced that Southern California Edison has chosen to sponsor or partnered with us to sponsor the LA County Public Library System, and we're looking for additional partners as we go. I think we're a great example of how there is a fantastic nexus as entrepreneurs, as people that deploy capital effectively and efficiently can do so in a way that really does achieve a social impact. Thanks, John.
Fantastic, thanks, Sunil. I mean, I think that the model with ABC Mouse, Age of Learning, really does embody this notion that we heard about earlier of shared value, this nexus of business ROI and social impact, a product that really is designed to improve educational outcomes, also turn a profit, and by virtue of that profitability, fund free access to software in libraries across the country. Really, really impressive model. So, Daryn, when we think of corporate social responsibility or changing the game as a company, we often think of companies leading efforts that are philanthropic and perhaps sometimes aligned with the business. But as an impact investor, how do you define changing the game as a company or CSR for Illumin Capital in the context of a financial services company? And to build on vitally important theme in America today, how important is your work to accelerating progress on the diversity, equity, and inclusion front? Obviously a huge challenge in America today. Big problem in Silicon Valley, perennial problem. We'd love to hear more.
Sure. I thought I'd share a little bit of background first, just as an orientation. Very early on, I started to put together, after having the ability in high school and college to travel throughout the United States South, the ideas around justice and economics. So I don't like having conversations about justice without economics, and I don't like having conversation about economics without justice. So impact investing became a way that I could express who I am in the world in a way that unites both of those different ideas. And when you, I kind of feel that across all the different areas of whether you're talking about corporations themselves or from an investor mindset, or for those of us that are investors into investors in the area of fund investing, how we think about what we do is critically important to transforming the challenges that our nation and our world face around justice and economics. So I grew up in DC, as Chad mentioned earlier, and the DC is one of the most unequal cities in the entire country. And that's measured by Gini coefficients, the relative difference between rich and poor in a given city. And they're areas of DC with double-digit unemployment now, and there are areas that are incredibly wealthy. So in that context, trying to put together the pieces of how this city could realize itself, that was something that was incredibly important. So as I look at the key kind of deciding factors throughout, part of what also informs the way I look at impact investing is I spent 3 years at the Self-Help Credit Union and the Center for Responsible Lending working on anti-predatory lending legislation that would protect low-income homeowners from predatory loans. We passed laws in 13 different states that save low-income homeowners about $9.1 billion in fees, excessive fees and interest on their loans, and ended up making it illegal to use certain products that had, I think we passed a law that said no net tangible benefit to the borrower was what we had to actually put into law in order to stop the abuse of low-income communities by some of the largest banks in the world. And after seeing that, I decided to go to business school. It's actually my 10-year reunion down the street at Stanford, to look at ways to create models and behavior change models so that the leaders of corporations and institutions would lead with a value set that would empower and be informed by understanding the fundamental systematic roots of both, business school does a great job of the economics part, but also of the justice part. And while I was there, I brought about 300 students down to New Orleans from the top 10 business schools in the United States and also in other places around the world. XLRI was a partner in that program. And we had 60 students from XLRI, Xavier Labor Relations Institute in India, come and join that program along with others. But the idea was that they would work and be and serve with communities and then take those leadership skills to the top of the corporations that they would later lead, and lead with informed by the impact of communities. So those are the things that shaped part of why I do what I do. So when I had the opportunity to move to New Orleans for 3 years after Katrina and bring business leaders down to inform the way that they lead by helping community entrepreneurs, I did that. And then I had the opportunity to work with the founder of TPG, Jim Coulter, in that process, where I learned about private equity from one of the leaders in the private equity industry, and decided to work for Calvert Funds, which was one of the leaders in impact investing in the world, where I spent 7 years leading the private equity area, investing in essentially 15 funds that are all impact oriented, representing 150 companies globally around the world, combining these ideas of economics and justice. So what I'll concentrate just a couple, one more minute of is sort of the big gaps that I see both in the global financial markets as it relates not only to CSR, but impact investing, and also the general global financial market for those that want to do great things and change in the world. One is that if we really, really look at the private equity model to do great work and impact, one of the big questions that we have to ask is if we're going to spend a bunch of time growing a company from 5 million to 100 million or a billion and then selling it, what's in the acquisition agreement that actually we sell it with that makes it continue and survive the exit and influence the upstream acquirer? So one of the things that I'm really curious about and I'm starting research on with some of the legal scholars at Stanford is around understanding with Ben & Jerry's exit agreement how we were able to maintain and create a board in perpetuity. So the agreement is in perpetuity. And 92 other legally binding provisions that help the company to maintain its social mission thesis inside of Unilever and work with Unilever to continually not only be influenced by Unilever and expanding its footprint globally, but also to continue to influence Unilever. So that's one aspect. The second aspect that I talk about is really looking at bias in investing. Why is it that we have this challenge around diversity of so many well-intentioned people that are leading companies that end up hiring workforces that look much the way they are. It's something that's deep within the psychology of the nation. It's deep within the psychology of the culture of venture capital. So looking at social psychologists to really help to understand and create solutions and interventions is one of the things that we've also looked deeply at, doing partnerships around with Stanford social psychologists to better understand the underpinnings of the deeper questions that we need to ask about the system. And, in business school, one of the things that we learn, like in psychology or organizational behavior, is that systems are designed to produce results. And when Sunil designs a company, it's producing certain results, and those results are by design. They aren't kind of flukes in a system. So one of the things that we'd have to ask, which is a difficult question, is if the system is producing outcomes, what is it about that system that needs to be changed? So it's a question that investors would ask about financials, if financial results aren't being met. So I think we need the same rigor and intensity that we're asking about the other aspects of social impact. And the final thing that I would say is that Brian Stevenson talks deeply about the issue of proximity to change as a key ability for those that desire to create change to do it. And there was wonderful things said on the panel before about proximity, but I would challenge those of us that are doing CSR, or those of us that are trying to build holistic companies that are making impact in the world, or even invest in them, that if we haven't been to the communities that we're trying to seek to change, go, understand, listen, understand the roots of the problem. We talked about design thinking earlier. And part of the reason being haunted by that idea, investing from these offices, I was given the opportunity to work in communities in which we're trying to transform and change. And while at Calvert, also brought a number of our portfolio companies, including Tesla and Revolution Foods, and our portfolio fund that was on the previous panel, DBL, to rural West Virginia, to a community that was 80% below the poverty line, to look at the key ways in which we might be able to work together and listen to the challenges of 2,000 people who lost jobs in the coal industry, and work together to recreate a new economy. So that the models of those great companies would be informed by that when they hire 5,000 or 7,000 people in Buffalo, or wherever they'll say hire from different places around the world, in a more inclusive and thoughtful and intentional way.
No, thanks so much, Daryn. It really makes me think of, again, back to shared value and that nexus of business ROI and social impact. And I remember this incredible pie chart I saw once that had an impact on me in a conversation around impact investing and corporate social responsibility. It was sort of, the pie of the US economy. And when you look at this tiny little sliver, 3% of US GDP that's in the nonprofit sector, you can do a lot with that capital, but you can't do nearly as much as you can when you influence what companies are doing, what companies are doing through their public policy stance, et cetera. So really appreciate those comments. Sukhinder, last but not least. You have been a serial entrepreneur for all of your life. You spent years at Google building the business there internationally, founder of Joyus, and most recently, theBoardlist. So let's talk about theBoardlist. Let's talk a little bit about Joyus. We often, and we just heard from Daryn about this importance of diversity and inclusion, about unconscious bias. We've had a conversation when we spoke about gender. You have a point of view on markets and gender. Talk to us a little bit about Joyus, theBoardlist, and your point of view there.
Sure. So for those of you who aren't familiar, theBoardlist is a peer-to-peer nomination platform that we started here in the tech industry, trying to drive more diversity in tech, top down, starting with Series B and beyond boards, because we think it's a white space where we talk about gender diversity and inclusion, And a couple years ago, you're right, I have a strong opinion on this. I think having been here for 20 years in the Valley and had a career that I really have loved, really feeling like it's to some degree we park the issues of gender inclusion at a forward doorstep when we say there's not enough girls in STEM. So if there's not enough girls in STEM, it's going to be multiple generations before we can solve the problem of gender diversity in tech, which to me is kind of orthogonal thinking. It's sort of, yes, we need to solve the problem of girls in STEM, but, there are problems throughout the entire ecosystem, and they're not all technical when it comes to gender diversity and inclusion. So a couple years back when I was frustrated having yet the nth conversation with the Tier 1 VC about what could be done in women in tech, I suggested that every VC in the Valley could put a woman on every Series B board and beyond, and pretty quickly influence gender diversity in tech, because I believe that there'd be a follow-on effect, not just in obviously better corporate governance and building better companies, which is as economic a reality as you can talk about, but also in modeling the type of behavior and the type of thinking and diverse thinking that may be reflected in their employee base or in their management team or in their customer set. And that was an opportunity. So the board list has about 1,000 nominating CEOs, VCs, and corporates here in the Valley, executives, men and women who have board experience, nominate women leaders for boards. We have about, I guess our numbers are outdated now, it's about 1,200 nominating members of our community. We've about almost 2,000 women who've been nominated for board service here in the Valley. And any company from Series A+ and beyond can apply to the board list and search the database to find a great woman for their board. Really with the thesis that we sort of, thank you, kind of want to end that saying, like, where are all the great women? I just, we sort of feel like we need to obliterate that question. Like, if you can't figure out how to use a free service that, people like Aaron Levy at Box and Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn and John Chambers have used to endorse great women for boards, and we're serving it up to you, something's wrong. So that's what the board list does. But I think on the broader theme of gender diversity and inclusion, I think it's sort of as you point out, and I think this is the one thing I would say to the folks in the room, it is broken at every part of the ecosystem, right? When you think about women entering, I think there's a big, big challenge in what I call the middle parts of people's career, women's careers, where, starting with not having maybe very family-friendly policies in, fairly, in an area where we don't have paid national federal leave, as an example, and there's still a wage gap. It starts with policies that help women stay, get into the workforce, but then stay in at times where they are challenged with being the primary caregiver, as well as, a high contributing employee. And so that's a danger zone. And then we get up, obviously, to executive levels, and what we see there is women's representation on management team committees, still needs to increase. And then, of course, we go up to the board, and women are absent there. So I think, and then of course there's girls in STEM and the technical side of the issue. So, when I think about the board list, my point to you is simply, yes, it's broken, but the philosophy we took at the board list, and I think it's the one we think needs to be adopted in tech, is, we look at every other problem in the world, whether it's poverty or, climate change or literacy, and we apply technology to those solutions. Yet when it comes to gender diversity and inclusion, we don't look around at the board list and we see lots of great organizations, but we think there needs to be a lot more product and services built in this area. And so when we started the board list, our thesis was, can you build a lean startup and use a lean startup methodology, and we are a benefit corp, so I'll describe our business model in a moment, to the problem of gender diversity in tech, and use product and technology leverage to start solving solutions. And we think the opportunity set and the challenge I would give anybody in this room is, if you see it, what can you do about it? And how do you use the same innovation mindset in this category that we use in other categories? And we think there's just a wide open space. So we started at the boardroom, but I would say at the board list and its parent company, which is called Choose Possibility, which is the benefit corp that holds the board list, we really fundamentally believe there's white space in multiple areas of tech for product-driven solutions and a lean startup methodology. And then our financial model, we are financially self-sustaining by charging membership fees on the platform. So as an individual CEO or woman candidate, you don't pay anything to be on the platform, but you're for corporate member, you pay for access, and then you pay for programming because we do a lot of board education and so on. And so to date, we've been financially sustainable on our own, but really one of the reasons we created a benefit corp is because we wanted the flexibility if we wanted to go out and raise equity, which we will probably do in the spring here. We'll probably raise some social impact equity, largely to be able to bootstrap product and engineering to the next level. We've been bootstrapping it, take it to the next level, with the thesis that we think we can both be financially sustaining and profitable. And of course, our core mission is both business performance and gender diversity infused together.
Thank you so much. So I got the dreaded 2-minute sign. So I'm going to move into another sort of slightly different question around the future. In sort of thinking about this incredible notion of solving social problems with a business lens, let's think about what it would look like. What would the world look like? Where would you be if you're successful at your company, at your organization, with your movement? Sunil, there is 100% ABC Mouse penetration in public libraries across the country. Most parents are using your product. Daryn, unconscious bias has been erased from the investing world. Sukhinder, 50% of all Fortune 500 boards are
And tech boards.
yes, are dominated by, populated by women. Amy, thousands of additional companies are part of the Pledge 1% movement. What does that world look like? Closing comments.
Sure, from our perspective, we've transformed education. We've made it so that each individual child has the foundation they need to be whoever and whatever they want to be when they grow up, and that'd be a great place to be.
Well, I think that the root of our challenges in the health system and the clean energy system, as we transition, also in the criminal justice system, the education system, are based on having are based on structural biases. So if we were to erase those, not only would investment portfolios rise with more production, but we'd also have a better society. It's a little bit tricky because you can't fully erase bias. We're all biased in our own ways, but I think those would be the impacts of reducing it.
Fantastic.
I think if you were to think about, I think if you were to think about what the world would look like with 50% of women on boards, I'd say two things about that world. Number one, companies, of course, would realize better business performance. There's a lot of data around that. But I think we would see a trickle-down effect, I hope, into the cultures of those companies themselves as women show up representative not only of shareholders, but representative of the customer base and the employee base in that company, and help CEOs build better cultures within their own companies. I think that's a knock-on effect of having great women on your board that people don't even think about in addition to business performance. And the other thing I'd say, if we saw that problem solved, well, at the board list or choose possibility, I'd say we'd be working on yet another social impact product inside of gender diversity somewhere else in the value chain for women in leadership.
Fantastic. Amy?
I'm going to go bold and say, Chad, we'd have solved all the millennial goals. Because I think that if we, it's interesting what you were saying about that pie. It's clear that the challenges of our world are not going to be solved by just nonprofit, social entrepreneurs, and government working together. We need to unleash the mainstream business world. And imagine if every company, everywhere in the world, integrated giving back, just unleashing their superpowers, whether it's their innovation, their talent, their connections, their unique way of looking at things. And they channel that toward just doing some good, whatever makes sense to them, but in a very kind of highly leveraged way that the people we know actually do and how they solve problems. I think, there's infinite possibilities. And so if we create this new normal where giving back is just in some way integrated into the DNA of every company, I think that the possibilities are limitless.
Fantastic. Thank you. We'll a big round of applause for these superstars. Thank you all for joining.